A person comes into a room and wonders who to talk to, and sort of is in doubt, you see. In that moment, he's choosing. Whereas a person who comes into a room and decides who to approach, he doesn't wait to choose. We say he is decisive, but that's a funny saying because it means he doesn't stop to decide. So in the training in Zen Buddhism, which is simply a Buddhist extension of Taoism, Zen Buddhism arose out of the marriage of Buddhism and Taoism in the 5th century AD and over the following centuries. So they have a way of training you so that you always act without choosing. For example, there was one day a leaky roof, and there were a couple of monks attending the Zen master, and he said, the roof is leaking. One monk disappeared and came back instantly with a sieve and put it under the drips. Another monk, after some time, came back with a bucket. The master praised the one who brought the sieve. Now, the action wasn't exactly appropriate, I mean, you know, to catching rain. But the point was that he was in the spirit of the Zen discipline by acting without choosing. And you will notice this with certain people. Certain people never hesitate. They always seem, if something needs to be done, they seem somehow simply to grab something and do it, you know, which is a kind of a Zen capacity. So what happens is this, that the teacher of Zen constantly throws curves at his students and puts them in dilemma situations where they have to act immediately. One of the things, of course, that you mustn't do is rush, because rush is a form of hesitation. When a person rushes to get a train, he starts to fall over his own feet. See? So it really holds him up. It's like trying to drive at high speed through the water with a blunt-nosed boat. That's rush. But now what he's trying to get is a kind of a smooth, unhesitating, flowing action that is the response to the challenge. And it must be done with what is called, another use of this word, mu. This is called wunyan in Chinese or munen in Japanese. And this word, nen, is composed of the character meaning now and the character meaning mind, heart, shin. And so has the meaning of a thought, but especially for us, it is well translated by the psychological term blocking. You're blocking, you say to someone, when they hesitate, when they dither, when they stop to choose. So the attitude of munen, or wunyan, is the unblocked mind, where it doesn't hesitate ever. Just as the river doesn't hesitate when it flows, and just when you clap your hands, the sound comes out without hesitation. And when the moon rises, the water doesn't wait to reflect it. It reflects it instantly. So that instant reflection, or it's a kind of resonance, is what is looked for as a response of the individual to his environment. And he does this to the degree that he knows himself to be one with his environment. Then his capacity for response increases in according to the way in which he feels that he is simply all of a piece with it and not something that is in it and with a barrier around him through which messages have to get, and then the decisions have to be made up and sent out. So then, you could say that a kind of extremely subtle sensory awareness has to be developed as between the individual and his environment, so that he feels it out. Now, today, this sort of talk is very unpopular. Because scientifically minded people, especially academic scientists, those who teach in universities, are exceedingly suspicious of intuitive reactions. They say, oh, blah, 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 blah. You can get into all sorts of trouble that way. But the thing that they neglect to realize is that everybody uses it. Even the most meticulously careful, analytical, rigorous, sound scientist uses intuitive judgment after a certain point. Why? Because you may accumulate data forever, and you may decide that this is on the whole, and taking all due things into consideration and procedures having been worked out, that this is the right thing to do. Why do you decide then? Mostly because time's up and somebody's pressing for a decision, or else you are bored to death with bringing in data, because you never know how much data you need to make a certain decision. And therefore you may go on collecting data till all is blue, but in the last analysis you'll work on hunch. And so much is actually in the end decided by flipping coins. And the pity of flipping coins for making decisions gives you only two choices, heads or tails, one way or the other. The Chinese have a more subtle way of flipping coins. They have a method of a 64-sided coin to flip, so that instead of just heads or tails, there are 64 possibilities of coming to a decision when you don't know what to do. This is called the I Ching, or the Book of Changes, where the symbols of yang and yin, that is to say, for yang, a straight line undivided, for yin, a line broken in the middle. There are 64 ways of combining 6 of these lines in a hexagram. And so there is a complex method when you have to make a grave decision for tossing. You do it by tossing sticks or coins, and it gives you one of these 64 figures. Now, if you are very wise and have studied the Book of Change for a long time, you don't need to use the book. You just look at what the figure is, and you can tell what it means. Because you see, these figures are made up of each 6 hexagram figure is made up of 2 threefold components. That has 2 components, of which this one is water, and this one is heaven. So you will have water over heaven. And a person very skilled in the interpretation will feel out the meaning of water over heaven. But actually, if you're not so skilled, there is the book. And for each of these hexagrams, the book has an oracle. And it tells you in curiously vague and yet curiously precise terms the meaning of this hexagram. And then you, in the light of your own situation, make up your mind what it's saying to you. In the light of the problem that you've raised, the question that you've asked, the decision that you had to make, you will find invariably that these 64 choices are one of them, or indeed all of them. But you have to pick one of them because you are, after all, tossing a coin. But it has some peculiarly appropriate thing to say to you under your circumstances, and it's just like having a conversation with a very, very wise old gentleman. And you must realize that today in Asia, this book is still widely used for making business and political decisions, although people who are westernized wouldn't let on, perhaps, that they use it. And so anybody who does politics or does business with Asia should be completely versed in this book to know what sort of thinking, what sort of approach might be expected under any circumstances. If you could ever find out what hexagram had fallen when a certain politician had made a decision, it would be immensely enlightening as to his future course of action. In the same way, for example, in dealing with Hitler, Our strategists, I don't know if they did, should have been students of astrology, because he was always consulting astrologers. And therefore, astrology would be much more easy to penetrate than the I Ching, because you can know Hitler is looking all the time at his own horoscope. Well, we have access to Hitler's horoscope, and so we know what he's thinking about it. But you don't have access to what hexagram Mao Zedong threw when he decided to do something or other. So it's a little bit more subtle. I'm making the point then that our scientists are very suspicious of the intuitive judgment. But nevertheless, they all use it in the end. And so it has made this suspicion that science has of intuitive judgment has filtered down to the average person in terms of a mistrust of his own intuition, of the marvelous analytical powers of his own brain. And so we are always in a dither of doubt as to whether we're behaving the right way, doing the right thing, and so on and so forth, and lack a certain kind of self-confidence. And if you see you lack self-confidence, you will make mistakes through sheer fumbling. If you do have self-confidence, you may get away with doing entirely the wrong thing. The British have an enormous degree of self-confidence. They know they're right, and they don't even question it. There are certain kinds of British types who are absolutely, their aplomb is unbelievable. And you can't shake them, but I wouldn't dream of it. They're not even defending themselves. They know they're so right. And therefore they can allow any kind of political revolution, total free speech. All sorts of things can go on, which make Americans very nervous because Americans don't have the same degree of aplomb. They're not quite sure, you see. When you're an aristocrat and you've been brought up for generations in the right schools, and there's never any doubt whatsoever, you don't even have to mention the fact that you're an aristocrat. See, I mean, that's why aristocrats know how to treat servants. But they never take it out on their servants in the sense of having to emphasize their own superiority, because they know they're superior. They don't even question it, see? Well, this is an extraordinary kind of nerve that they've built up. So the only way, you know, you can do this is, first of all, in Zen practice, the thing that you have to understand is this. You have to regard yourself as a cloud in the flesh, because you see, clouds never make mistakes. Did you ever see a cloud that was misshapen? Did you ever see a badly designed wave? No, they always do the right thing. Now, so as a matter of fact do we, because we are natural beings just like clouds and waves. Only we have complicated games which cause us to doubt ourselves. But if you will treat yourself for a while as a cloud or wave and realize that you can't make a mistake, whatever you do, because even if you do something that seems to be totally disastrous, it'll all come out in the wash somehow or other. Then, through this capacity, you will develop a kind of confidence, and through confidence you will be able to trust your own intuition. Only the thing that you have to be careful about, and many people who have not understood Zen properly fall into trouble here, is that when they take the attitude that I can't possibly make a mistake, they overdo it, which shows that they don't really believe it. So a lot of people come on and say, well, in Zen, anything goes. You're naturally with it anyway. You are a Buddha anyhow, and I'm going to prove I'm a Buddha anyhow by breaking all the rules. So you put on the weirdest, filthiest clothes, and you go and steal things, and all kinds of things like that. That's overdoing it. That shows that you haven't learned. You're overcompensating. Because before you were told to do this, do that, and the other, and watch, and be self-conscious and nervous, and so on. And so you just go to the other extreme. But this is the middle way of knowing it has nothing to do with your decision to do this or not. Whether you decide that you can't make a mistake, or whether you don't decide it, it's true anyway, that you are like cloud and water. And through that realization, without overcompensating in the other direction, you will come to the point where you begin to be on good terms with your own being and to be able to trust your own brain. But at that level, you are supra-personal. That is to say, when you realize that you stand here as a body, it's as if you see, there was, according to certain cosmological theories today, a primordial explosion which blew up and created the universe. And you know how it is when you take a bottle of ink and you throw it at a whitewashed wall, smash like that, and it goes splat all over the place. There's a big blob in the center. And then as it goes out, it gets all sorts of little curlicues and wiggles. So you see, the cosmic explosion is still happening. It takes a long time from that big essential bang for the whole thing to go whoosh. It takes billions of years for it to happen. And it's still happening. And we're the little curlicues out on the edge. See? And we're connected. We are part of the central explosion that originally happened. That, in a certain sense, is in you. You're still manifesting it, you see? So when you consider yourself as a physical being, consider this hand. It is very ancient. Just like you pick up a stone. Say, how old is this stone? Well, scientists will say, well, it's about, comes from the Pleistocene age, and it's probably, 4 million years old. But then you think, well, wait a minute. You mean 4 million years old? Where did it come from? What was it before it was a stone? Well, it was something or other. And that goes back, you see. So everything you touch, including yourself, is incredibly ancient. It goes back to the very beginning of time. So if your mind awakens, you suddenly see all your friends sitting around you looking incredibly ancient. I don't mean in the sense of old and haggard, but like angels, like eternal beings who were always there from the beginning.
Sounds True presents Leave It Be, Session 7, The Way of the Tao, with Alan Watts.
For the sake of clarity, I want to be quite sure that this whole group has the fundamental Taoist principles clear. Although Lao Tzu started his book by saying that the Tao which can be spoken is not the eternal Tao, he nevertheless went on to write a book about it. And all of us who are philosophers in the poetic sense of the word know very well that we are trying to describe the indescribable, to F the ineffable, and unscrew the inscrutable. But nevertheless, some attempt may be made at it, even if only we use words to show the limitations of words. So in these beautiful characters, we have sort of a summary. There's one word missing, but nevertheless, it will do. The word Tao means something like the way. I would rather call it the course of nature, as we use the word course when we say of course, or when we talk about a watercourse, the flow of things. The character is made up, first of all, of a radical, number 162 in the catalog. All Chinese words are classified under their radicals. And this particular radical has a basic meaning of motion. And the radical is the part of the character to the left of it and flowing underneath. Rhythmic motion is basically what it means. But you have very definitely here the sense of an intelligent rhythmic motion. But it can't be pinned down or defined because it's too close to us. It is that which we basically are, and all those things that we basically are, time, space, consciousness, are impossible to define for just the same reason that you can't look straight into your own eyes or bite your teeth. Now, we get anxiety about that because we would like to feel that we were in control of what we basically are. But then, unfortunately, if we were, we'd make a mess of it. Because the controlling mind works on a linear system. That is to say, words and numbers which are strung out in lines, and they are much too simple to take care of the complexities of nature. So be thankful for your brain, which you don't understand, which is completely incomprehensible, but that upon which all comprehension depends. So the Tao which can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. So then the next principle in line is this one, which is called Wu Wei. Wu is a word that means none or not. Wei means forcing, shoving, pushing the stream. And so if you understand the Tao, you do not push the stream. You learn a basic sensitivity to what Charlotte Selver calls your inner, your true feeling. And that needs quietness in order to really understand what it is. I have proposed that the new form of college entrance examination be to write a 20-page paper on your idea of paradise. What you would really like to happen to you. And I find people find this extremely difficult to conceive. Study Western religious art and look at the pictures of heaven. They're very boring. Islamic people had a better idea. When you look at Persian miniatures, Chinese have wonderful paintings of heaven. I asked a Zen master once, what's your idea of heaven? And he said, I remember a Chinese painting of a kind of a summer house in the mountains overlooking a waterfall. And seated around the table, there are 4 gentlemen drinking wine and discussing the classics. And behind each gentleman, there is a beautiful young lady who is massaging his back and scraping his ears and rubbing his hair. It is a man's point of view. I would like to see a similar painting of a woman's idea of paradise. I wonder what it would be like. I very much wonder. It could even be the same picture. No, I doubt it. I very much doubt it. Because the reason why I doubt that they would be using sandpaper is one reason why some women become lesbians is that they feel that men are utterly insensitive to delicacy of touch. That they are rough and brutal and have no idea what a sensitive instrument is the harp of a woman's body. very important. Some of the best massage that can be done is done without touching. It's simply the vibratory aura of the fingers, whatever this electricity is that comes out of this, passing into the other person's body. And this extremely gentle approach to touching people, we could do it, we could demonstrate. For example, Al and I were doing a wrist dance this morning, but we could do exactly the same thing without touching each other at all. And this achieves such heights of expertise in Aikido that they can throw people without touching them. An attacker comes, I've watched it. There's a fellow at Santa Cruz by the name of Prager, who's a great Aikido master. And I've watched people go slamming at him, and he moves in a certain way, and they fall on the floor, and he never touched them. So we have contacts way beyond the surface of our skins. So to get back here to Wu-Wei, this means work on the basis that you and the Tao, which is the water flow of nature, always taking the line of least resistance, are the same. And Goethe understood this. He wrote a marvelous little essay called The Fragment on Nature, in which he said, we go with nature even when we work against her. There is no way out. We may imagine that there is, but that very imagination is itself part of the stream, so forget it. And it isn't that you are being forced, it isn't that you are being pushed around by something external to yourself, because the Tao constitutes the very essence of what you are. And so this character here, Qi, means that flow that is in you and can be experienced physically as breath, although it isn't limited to breath. We need the Sanskrit word prana to assist us here. Prana is vital force, but all these Western equivalents are very tricky. Vital energy, which is manifested in breath, and breath is completely fascinating. First of all, you cannot be sure whether you are breathing or whether you are being breathed, because it goes on when you're not thinking about it. And yet when you begin to think about it, you feel you're doing it. And beginners in yoga who study pranayama, which means the discipline of breath, often get tied up because they think that if they don't remember to breathe, it won't go on. And they get nervous. But of course it will. And the reason why one becomes aware of breathing and does various so-called breathing practices is that you will see through the experience of breath that the voluntary and the involuntary are the same process. That is also experienced in the Tai Chi and other exercises where we dance with each other, say in wrist play, because we discover in that it's impossible to say who is leading and who is following. It all becomes one. And ideal sexual intercourse is the same thing. And not only the actual intercourse, but loving. There suddenly vanishes any differentiation between who proposes and who disposes, who calls and who answers. And this game in Zen Buddhism is called host and guest. If, for example, I meet you on the street and I say, good morning, and you say, good morning, I'm host and you're guest. because you followed my lead. If I say good morning, and you say it's not a good morning, you have reversed the position, see? And you've refused to be guessed. Now imagine another situation in which we both said good morning at the same time. Then host and guest, ghost and hest have been transcended. And we don't know who was the leader and who was the follower. You know, we allow the machine to be the host. So qi may be most simply thought of as breath, although it means our total psychophysical energy. And in Aikido, one might say you imagine an outstretched arm is a rubber hose with water flowing through it to a point at which you look out there, and you simply assume that the arm is immovable. And actually, you could practice this. You could hold your arm outstretched in that frame of mind for an incredibly long time without feeling tired. Just assume it'll stay there. You might think this an exercise in asceticism, but it isn't. It's the simplest thing in the world to do. Just assume that it'll remain, and the qi will flow along. We don't have a scientific